Hey everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nissa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Now, I came out here at 5:30 last night. It was late and it was cold, and I came out here to do a voiceover because I have just been so far behind on getting them done. I got dinner almost completely done, got Daryl to stand out in the kitchen and supervise it while I came out, and then I went in, I served up dinner, I ate dinner, and then I sat down to edit and there was no sound. So there was absolutely no sound on the video and I couldn't do anything with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause it and make sure that I've got all the connections correct before I continue, because I don't want that to happen again. So bear with me a sec. So today we're all good. So I must have knocked a connection loose or something, because I have to carry the tripod and stuff out into the garden to do the voiceovers. So going through a gate or something, I must have knocked the mic, or I don't know, but there was no sound. So I have to do it again. And I always hate redoing voiceovers for the same video, because I always second guess myself as to whether I've already said something, because I remember saying it from the time before that I filmed it, and then refilming it off the same notes becomes an issue. But anyway, you're going to have to just bear with me. So I did want to, and I did on the previous one again, where, I'm re-recording, it's always hard. I am behind. A lot of it is car issues. So we have a Ford Ranger, and I'm very grateful to have the vehicle that we have, but it has had a lot of problems since we bought it. And it currently has a diesel or an oil leak in the engine mount, and we aren't real sure what's causing it. Last time we had it serviced, they said there was a leak around the gasket in one of the injectors, but they wanted to keep it for a couple of weeks to be able to fix it, and we can't do without a car for a couple of weeks because it's the only vehicle we have. We have discussed a second vehicle, and people bring it up all the time on here because we don't all fit in our car. But the problem is, it's not even the purchase of the vehicle that we would figure out somehow. It's the ongoing costs. It's the rego, the insurance, making sure it's driven often enough to stay good and all the rest of it. So at the moment, we got the car running again for the moment, and it could be partially the battery that's the issue. So negative temperatures are not great for car batteries. We haven't really had any problem years past, but anyway, we seem to be, the battery's only about 18 months old, so it's not an old battery, but it's not coping real well. So we're using the Jackery and a battery charger to charge it if we need to jump it and things like that. I do have one of those battery pack jumpers, but I can't find the clips on the Anderson cable to go into it, so I need to sort that out. So we have got it running again at the moment, but it's a little unreliable. We're getting a load of water in tomorrow just to make sure that we're all good while we're babying the car a little bit. It's a cost outlay, but it's better safe than sorry and all that, so we'll do that. And in the meantime, we're figuring out what's going on with the car. We're probably going to get some friends to have a look at it and tell us what we need to do, whether we need to take it to a specific mechanic, whether we're going to be without a car for a couple of weeks, all that sort of thing. We'll just have to play it by ear for the moment. But we got into town, got all our animal feed for a couple of weeks, got fuel for the generator and all that sort of stuff, and we can drive it if we need to. It's just, we're a little wary of it, so that's fine. But it has put a little bit of a crimp in plans, because I had planned to do voiceovers and all this other thing. Daryl was supposed to go to Toowoomba on Tuesday, which is when we couldn't get the car started, to do a Bunnings run and to pick up the screens and stuff that Robin is giving us from when she got them replaced in her place. So we were going to use them for part of the little shed thing that Daryl's going to build for me, and for screening off the back doors that we just installed. And he was going to get the feet and some timber and stuff to help with the extension of the chicken pens and for the little shed that he's going to make me too. So we had to put that off, which is fine. Robin's available next Thursday, so hopefully we can get something sorted before then. But we obviously need to move on it because the grocery trip is at the end of August, and I need the car and to be able to take the trailer to do that as well. So, we're figuring things out slowly. Anyway, so we're back on the food videos, and I don't know what part we're up to. And I probably need to just scrap that whole part thing, because now, when it used to be happen like every day or second day that the videos came out, the parts, and it was only like 4 weeks between shops, that was probably more relevant. But now that we're going 8 weeks apart, I probably just need to title them with the stuff that's in them. I don't know. I'm still working on it. YouTube takes a lot of thought and planning and energy, and I don't always have all that. So I film all the content, but getting it out is sometimes challenging, which is unfortunate because the filming of it isn't what makes me money, but you know. So another food prep planning and preservation video for you today for the July-August food stuffs, and I have plenty more to come. I just need to get the time to get the voiceovers done, which part of that was getting that little shed thing built for me that is basically straight out the back door. So we were going to put a little bit of a path straight out the back door, walk to it, and I could just step out there. It's somewhat near the chicken pens. We get all the animal sounds and the bush sounds still, but a little bit muted on the kid sounds, which is the benefit. And I don't have to cart my tripod and camera all the way out to the garden. So, you know, it's fine. It's easy enough to do. It turns me off sometimes. So I do find the voiceovers work too, like the talking to the camera for 20 to 30 minutes. It is hard work. Like, I try not to talk to people for extended periods of time. That's why I stay at home all the time. I do text messages rather than phone calls and things like that. So I do find them a little bit of hard work, and sometimes I'll put them off because I just don't feel like I'm in the mood. And if I'm not in the mood, then the voiceover is not going to be pleasant to listen to. So, because as we all know, you can always hear the smile in a voice, and you can hear a frown in a voice too. So let's get into it anyway, and I will see you guys at the end. So this video was just after, like this filming these days, just after we'd got the hamper, and one of the things that we got in the hamper was some fresh corn cobs, and I adore fresh corn cobs. I like them boiled, steamed, fried, grilled, anything. I just really like fresh corn, so it was really nice to have. But one of the things that we do really like are corn ribs. So you cut the corn cobs in vertically. So if you're having problems, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, and it depends on how what corn type it is as to how wide the core is in the middle. That makes a difference into how easy it is to cut as well. Always use a sharp knife. I always like to freshly sharpen my knife before I do these, and sometimes cutting them in half so they're sort of mini cobs rather than long cobs is the way you have to do it just to make it a success. So you need to cut them vertically down the middle, and then those halves you cut them in half again. Some corn cobs have really nice thick cores, and you can actually go again and get a really narrow one, but if you go too far, then the cobs tend to just sort of shatter and you end up with small pieces, which still tastes fine but don't give you that rib factor. So I generally just go into fours. So I cut them all into four, and then I season them. So I use some lemon or lime juice, something acidic, a bit of oil, a bit of salt and pepper, some smoked paprika. Sometimes you can use a little bit of brown sugar if that's what your flavor profile is, what you like, a bit of garlic, anything you like there. You're just going to season that corn and get it coated in between those little corn kernels and stuff before you're roasting it. And then it gets thrown in the oven. So nice and spread out on a flat tray so it's not touching, and it gets thrown in the oven. As it cooks, it'll curl up, and that's where you get the whole like rib thing. So it curls up like meat ribs, and then flares out those corn kernels, and you get all that seasoning is in between the corn kernels, and it looks really pretty, but it also tastes really nice. To have with it, I just did a really simple savoury rice dish. So we had leftover pork roast from the day before. I've got eggs at the moment because I bought a whole bunch of eggs, but we're also getting eggs in, which is great actually because we're saving eggs now because we're going to start our first lot of hatching next week. So we're able to collect eggs to put aside for hatching as well as eggs for eating. So that's really good. So I scrambled up a whole bunch of eggs. I cut up some broccoli, so because we've still got plenty of broccoli, cut that up nice and small, some bacon, anything that I had odds and ends of, because that's how I make this sort of rice dish. This is sort of a fried rice, but it's not, because I made the rice to make the dish. So if I'm making a fried rice, I generally speaking try to make the rice in the morning and refrigerate it, or the day before, or I use leftover rice, that sort of thing, because then the rice isn't as wet and it fries up better. This time I didn't even fry the rice, I just used fresh rice and mixed all these things through. So it's quite wet, quite sticky, rather than dry and fried like a fried rice. But I did add similar flavors. I added in some sesame oil, some soy sauce, and all this, basically the same mix-ins that I would use for fried rice anyway, you know, the bacon and the eggs and the pork and all that sort of thing. But it was more just a savory rice dish than a fried rice as such. Same kind of thing, but a little bit different. Same, but different. This is how the ribs turn out, and basically this dinner was just a whole lot of ribs because we had a whole lot of ribs served with that rice for them to eat however they wanted with that. I do think did I mention that I put a whole bunch of broccoli in that rice too, because I wanted the greens in there too, which is not something I would normally put in a fried rice either. So I made plenty the night before, so for the next morning we had leftover ribs with leftover rice, and then I fry an egg on top. So one of the things that I do with leftovers too that are a bit like this is that I fry a fresh egg to go over the top, and then that way it moistens the dish that's dried out a little bit in the fridge, but it makes it feel like a fresh dish. So we do that quite regularly. I wanted to do some stock, so every now and again I go through my freezer and I see how many bags of carcasses and bones that I've got in the freezer, and I know that it's time to clean it out a little bit. So I keep everything, the carcasses from whole chickens, the leg bones from legs that we do. Thighs I don't tend to. When I debone a thigh, I normally feed those raw thigh bones to the dogs as a treat because they really enjoy those. But with the legs and that, we're cooking the legs so they can't have the bones because they're cooked, whereas the thighs I take them out before I cook them, so that works well for them as a treat. But I keep the legs, wings, bits, any sort of carcasses and anything like that from any chicken, and it all gets put into bags. So I have a bunch of Ziploc bags that are in the freezer and they have labels on them, and that's what they get used for. So there's like ones with chicken scraps, ones with pasta that gets frozen, ones with frozen fruit, things like that, and all the bags just get folded up and stuck back in the freezer. And so when you've got something to go in there, you just stick them in the relevant bags, and because they're stored in the freezer, that's fine because nothing ever goes bad because they're in the freezer. So I went a hunt through and got any sort of chicken carcasses or pieces or any sort of juices that were frozen from the bottoms of the pressure pot and all that sort of thing, and stuck it in a pot. The marinated legs that have been roasted, they add a real nice flavour to the stock, but they will make it kind of cloudy because you've got some of the seasonings from the skin of the legs that are left over, as well as the roasted bones tend to make the stock a little less clear. And of course, we've eaten off these bones. I don't have a problem with that because it's being pressure cooked. It went straight into the freezer as they were eaten, and then it gets pressure cooked, so anything that could potentially be on there is killed. But it does mean that there's bits and pieces left on the bones that are going to add to the stock as well. I also added some vegetables, so some limp-looking celery that I found, a few carrots, some corn cobs that I had in the back of the freezer, a bit of garlic and onion, salt and pepper, dash of apple cider vinegar before topping it up with water. Then put it in the pressure canner, using it as a cooker, 90 minutes under pressure, and then after 90 minutes it means that the bones will just be completely mushable by hand, which means that we process it into dog food. When I made the roast on the last video, I actually cut the roast into 3, but only had room on the tray to cook 2 of the pieces. So the other piece I tossed back in the fridge. So I'm mincing it up today, a nice coarse grind, because we're going to make some Zuppa Toscana soup. The purpose of making the stock was also to make something with it as I make it. So even if I'm canning some of the soup, I like to make a dish with the soup, the fresh stock as well. So I quite often make like a lasagna soup or something that uses stock, and then I use half the stock fresh and then I can the rest of it. That's generally how it works. So today we're going to make Zuppa Toscana with that, which is an Italian sausage and potato soup, and mine is nowhere near authentic, but this is where I got the idea from. There is a recipe for it because I can it as well, and I think the recipe came from the what's her name? The lady who does the Diva pressure cooker books, Canning Diva pressure cooker books. She has one that has a whole lot of meals in it, and one of them is maybe it's from her. I can't remember, don't quote me on that. She does have a load of potato soup as well that we use as inspiration for making that for canning as well. We really enjoy making those two for the shelf. So it's not at all authentic, but you know, it is similar. So once the pork mince is ground, I season it. So I use some smoked paprika, salt, pepper, onion, garlic, and Italian herbs. Stick with the ratios that we've discussed previously on like the sausage videos and that, as in like you're supposed to use 2% salt to the weight of the meat for things like sausages and stuff like that, sticking to those sort of ratios. But in the end, I sort of just sprinkle it all on. I weigh a few bits and pieces. I get a guesstimate of how much weight of the mince is before adding the spices. And then if I want to, I just fry off a little piece of it to taste before adjusting the seasonings. I want to massage that seasoning through the mince really well so that all of it's coated and ready to go to be cooked. So after that, I strained the stock. So as I said, because I'm going to use some of this stock in the soup, it needed to be done in this sort of a process. We strain it over a colander into Tupperware to store, and then it either goes in jars for the shelf, or we use it. I don't strain it. I just strain it through the metal colander. I don't use fabric. I don't use any sort of filtering of any sort. It's just through the colander, which does mean that there will be some matter in my stock. If you want your stock to be really nice and clear, you need to like double, triple strain it, and you need to use some sort of a fabric as well, not just a colander, because there is lots of small little particles in it that won't be caught by the colander. We don't really care. We're happy for it to be cloudy and things like that. It doesn't really matter. I also don't, some people chill it, skim the fat off, and then we'll use the stock without the fat for canning, because fat can interfere with the seals on pressure canned jars. I don't, because I like the flavour of the fat. So all I do is I give generous headspace in my jars, and if any of them fail, then I make sure I take the pressure up really nice and slow. But if any of them fail, then I just use them within the first few days, and I don't can them. So, you know, like it doesn't worry me, because I'll just use them instead of putting them on the shelf. So then I got started on the soup. I sliced up some onion and some bacon. I cook the bacon off first and then add the onion in afterwards. So we want the bacon to be sort of brown before you add the onion, or the onion's going to burn before you can get the bacon cooked where you want it. I add a bit of garlic, but again, only once the onion is mostly cooked, because the garlic will burn otherwise. And then I add the pork mince. So we're going to put the pork mince in the pot, and we're going to make sure that we don't mush it around too much, because the texture of the soup is better if there's some chunks of sausage in the soup, not just this sort of pureed mince type thing. So we're going to cook the mince off, but we're going to be sort of gentle with it and allow some clumps to form within it. I spent the time while I was, you know, babying the mince and sort of thing, dicing up the red potatoes really nice and small for the soup. I am a bit sad that I didn't grab more of these bags of potatoes, because I really should have canned a whole lot of them with, like, I should have got more to can for the shelf, because we don't have much in the way of any soups or anything on the shelf at the moment. But I didn't realize that these were the really nice red clean skinned small potatoes, and if I would have bought another bag. I don't really like potatoes canned on the shelf just plain. We have done dry canning potatoes, and we have done potatoes in water and potatoes in stock, and whilst they're all edible, none of them are really worth doing for us. But I do like potato in soups. I do like a loaded potato soup, as I said, and I really like the Zuppa Toscana, but we do a whole lot of vegetable soups as well, or beef and vegetable soups, or chicken and vegetable soups, and they all have potato in them. So when I have these little clean skinned, easy dice red potatoes, they are perfect for that sort of thing, and I really should have got another bag, but I didn't check the bag when I bought it. I just bought a bag of potatoes sort of thing. So the other thing with canned potatoes is that you can create thickness in soup. So if I've made say I've canned a Zuppa Toscana and I'm serving it up, but I really want a little bit more body in the soup. I don't want to puree the actual Zuppa Toscana soup, because it's got the sausage in it, and you don't want to puree the sausage. But if I grabbed another jar of potatoes, I drained the liquid out of them, and I pureed those potatoes and added them to the soup, then it's going to give a really nice thickness and a texture to the soup without impacting the flavour in any way. And then you've got that bit of stock that you've canned these potatoes in that you can use to thin out the soup again if you need to, and that sort of thing. So having jars of canned potatoes on the shelf is beneficial. We just don't eat them as plain potatoes, but we do love the soups that they make. Once the mince was all cooked off, I put it aside. I used a thermoserver because I have one, which will keep it nice and hot, but it's not really that relevant. The thermoservers are great. I earned one, I think, from a certain amount of sales, and Mum had one on the shelf that I brought home as well. They're great for risottos and things like that, but I don't use them a whole lot. Once I had removed the pork, I used stock to deglaze the pan. I brought it to a boil and then added in all the potato I had diced up. So once the potatoes were tender, so you want them pretty much cooked through, I added in the pork that I had cooked. I stripped and cut up all the kale that we had gotten in the hamper. So I stripped the stems off and just sliced up the kale, put that in the soup along with some lemon juice and some coconut cream. It's really nice served with some sour cream, I find, but it's nice without it too. It gives it that texture thing, but adding more, like that pureed potato would do a similar sort of thing as well. And I heated up some of the homemade garlic bread to go with it. This is a really nice soup. It has your greens in it and your potatoes in it, as well as the sausage. It's very flavorful. It's quite fatty, which is nice, and when you put it in the fridge and get it out the next day, it generally has quite a significant cap of fat on the top of it because it's done with that pork sausage, and I don't drain anything. But it is very tasty, so it's worth making if you haven't made it before. And it's a good use of pork. It's a different meal to use the pork with. The next day I started off with making some buns. So I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing with them originally, but I was wanting to keep testing out the oven. So one of the things that I wanted to try the oven as was as a proofer. So the oven is a commercial oven. So it has a pilot light, a gas oven, so it has a pilot light that runs 24/7, and apparently that keeps the temperature inside the oven quite warm. Now I've had a temperature probe in there to have a look at what sort of temperature the inside of the oven was running, and during the day it is quite a few degrees warmer than outside temperature. So I wanted to test proofing things in the oven with just the pilot light going. So I mixed up some light brioche dough in the KitchenAid, which is just a basic hamburger dough. I don't like a heavy brioche dough because I find it too cakey. So it's got egg and it's got oil and stuff in it. It's an enriched dough, but it's still got water and stuff in it too. So it's only like a light brioche dough. I put it in the proofer to double, and once I pulled it out again, I shaped it. I do about 90 grams per ball, and I do all the normal things. I'm pulling the outside to the middle to create a nice tight surface, rolling it in my hands to make sure the bottom is all pinched together, and putting them on the tray. I put them on the baking trays to proof, and then I stuck it in the oven with the pilot light going. Now I didn't stick it on in my cast iron dishes because they are cold. They take a lot to warm up, whereas the aluminium cookie sheets should warm up in the area of the oven quite quickly. So that's what I put them on. But I did also grab boiled the kettle and put boiling water into a little pot and put it in the oven as well, just to boost that temperature initially while I opened it up and put the colder stuff in there. Now the dough, when I mixed it up, I used warm water, and then it sat in the warm proofer, and then it cooled a little bit as it was shaped, but it had good activity levels because of the heat, and it was instant yeast. So whilst the oven was working as a proofer, it was also more about maintaining the already warm dough than heating it from cold. I think that would require much more heat. I don't think that this would work fantastically well for sourdough or anything like that, where the dough is cold and you're trying to, really push that activity. But especially not in this weather. It might work when it's a little bit warmer, but not quite warm enough. It'll boost it just those extra couple of degrees. That might be really handy in sort of spring, but in this temperature I think that would need a lot more heat. But for a warm dough that has already been handled and has already been proofed, it's instant yeast, and this worked really well. They proofed up really nice and quick in that oven, and it just gave me a little bit of extra boost. Once the buns had proofed and doubled, I brushed them with some egg mixed with water and sprinkled them with sesame seeds. I had turned the oven on to preheat as soon as I pulled the buns out, and it preheats pretty quickly because it's just a steel box and it's gas. So by the time I had glazed them and stuff, they were ready to go in, and I put them in to bake. After they had baked, I made the decision to cook up some of the buttermilk chicken from earlier in the month to use on the buns, seeing as we had all that avocado and tomatoes and stuff. So I pulled the buttermilk chicken out of the freezer and laid it on a rack over a baking tray and got that cooking. So remember that this was cooked initially, it was deep fried, and then I flash freeze it in bags, and I find that means that when you're reheating it, it is delicious because it is crispy and crunchy and tasty because all that fat was in the deep frying. But it does mean that you want to put it on a rack over a tray because it will weep some fat as it's reheating back up, and you don't want it to go soggy by sitting in that fat. You want that fat to weep underneath it. So on a rack over a tray, and it works perfectly. It would work great in an air fryer too, I'm sure, but we haven't found the air fryer efficient for power for us. Then I mixed up a sort of a guacamole. I had a bunch of avocado, some of the toom from Costco, which I highly recommend. That was really, really nice. I'm definitely getting that again. It only has about a 7-day use once it's opened, but we managed to use it in like mashed potato and on wraps and on sandwiches, toasted sandwiches, in many, many things. It was really nice. I used the end of a jar of mayo I had, a bit of salt and pepper, I probably used a bit of lemon juice or lime juice, and roughly mashed that up. I don't think I got a picture, but we had the guacamole with some fresh tomato, the buttermilk chicken, and that on the buns, and it was super tasty. It was just a chicken burger night, and it was, should have had salad or veggies or something, but, I am a bit slack when it comes to things like that. We have heaps of veggies at lunchtime sometimes, and I go, well, that allows me to not have to worry about them at dinner. I don't have footage of lunch for the next day. It was probably leftover buns with bacon and eggs and stuff on them. But for dinner, I wanted to try that chorizo orzo pasta dish that I had found and purposely bought the ingredients for. I diced up the chorizo, started cooking it off. The recipe says to cook it so it's like little bacon bits. So I cooked it off well. And then I diced up some broccoli really nice and small as well. There's no broccoli or anything in this recipe, but I like to add greens where I can. Once it was cooked off, I added some garlic and then the pasta. So this dish is very reminiscent of a risotto, but with the pasta. And the steps are similar, but the theory is that it cooks a whole lot quicker, so it's a much more convenient dish to make. Once the pasta was coated in the oil, I started adding in the liquid, some acid. We don't have any cooking wine at the moment, so I used some vinegar or lemon juice or something, as well as plenty of stock. Some coconut cream, all the broccoli, and then you simmer it and cook it through. Now, this was fine, but I think I'd have just preferred an actual risotto and just done it in the oven or the Thermomix. Yes, this did cook quicker, but it also stuck to the bottom quite a bit because it was at a higher temp to be able to cook that pasta and the broccoli and stuff in a quicker time, and it just wasn't as nice. Like, I don't feel like it had as nice a mouthfeel as a standard risotto. Now, I have another kilo of that risoni or orzo pasta, whatever you want to call it, for whichever region you're in, to make another dish or two with. And I purposely bought 2 meals worth to give it a go. I have used, I think, the chorizo in something else now because I wasn't going to make that dish again. It was okay. Everyone ate it, but yeah. So I'm not real enamored of it. So if anyone has any recipes using risoni or orzo or whatever you want to call it, then put them in the comments for me. Send me some links because I'm going to use the next kilo that I've got of it, and I like the concept of it, but it just didn't work as well in practice. So I won't buy it again if I can't find something that I like to use it for. But it is nice to have some different varieties of types of pasta because we rely on pasta a fair bit in meals. I know we probably shouldn't, but we do because it's a cheap filler, and you can do so many different flavors with pasta dishes and so many different meats and some without meat at all and creamy or tomatoey or green basil. Like, you can do just so many things using pasta as a base, so it's nice to have different varieties. So I always buy like spaghetti as well as spirals as well as penne as well as, you know, all that sort of thing. So having the orzo was just another variation on that kind of thing. But yeah, I wasn't real enamored of the dish. The flavour was okay and everything else. It was fiddly to make. It burnt to the bottom and the texture was okay, but I think I would have preferred it in a risotto. So anyone has any recipes that they use risoni or orzo for, let me know and I will give them a go with the last of the stuff that I've got left, and then I'll make a call as to whether I buy more next month or not. So that was another few days worth of food for this month. So I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you've dealt with my rambling. That's been pretty extensive, this video. And I will see you guys on the next video. Hopefully I can get some stuff actually done at a decent pace over the next few days. We will see. No guarantees on anything. So I'll talk to you later. Bye guys.